Welcome into Texans Today, everybody. Coming up on the show today, 5 guys who are going to shock everyone in 2025. But before we get there, we are so close, ladies and gentlemen. We are just under 250 subs away from 30K. Help me get there. If you haven't subbed already, get that free sub button down there for daily Texans news and rumors content. We are so close to 30,000. Help a young kid from Houston get there and help this be the #1 Texans channel here on YouTube. As I mentioned on today's show, 5 Texans that could shock you by not only making the 53-man roster, but also making an impact at some point this season. I'm going to be breaking all those guys down on today's show. But before we get going, actually, some news that happened around the time of filming this video. The Texans claim Jackson Woodard, linebacker from UNLV, and hell, I might have had him on this video if the Texans were to sign him as a UDFA right after the draft, because he impressed me a lot in 2024, the linebacker out of UNLV. Very athletic, 135 tackles, 3.5 sacks, 17 tackles for loss, 12 pass breakups, 4 INTs. This dude, he was an animal this past year for UNLV. First 2 seasons at Arkansas, then transferred over there to the Rebels. But maybe the Texans getting another decent practice squad guy, or maybe somebody who, like these guys in today's video, could shock everyone this season. Now, before I get into my list of guys, go down in the comment section and let me know. Name someone who everybody's sleeping on this Texans roster right now. Go down in the comment section, shoot your shot, and let me know. Who are we not even giving the time of day right now that's actually going to make a big impact for this team? First up, and maybe not a surprise to everybody, but I would say to the NFL landscape, Brevin Jordan is a name that could shock a lot of people of how much he's going to be used in this Texans offense in 2025. They have a new OC in Nick Caserio who loves his tight ends, and Brevin Jordan, before getting injured last offseason, was set to, I believe, have a breakout campaign for the Texans before that unfortunate injury that took him out of 2024 and 2023. 17 receptions, 219 yards, 2 touchdowns. This isn't including that awesome game he had in the playoffs up against the Cleveland Browns where he had that 76-yard touchdown from CJ Stroud. He was awesome. And like I said, going into last offseason, going into the regular season, he was somebody that a lot of people were looking at to have that jump. Didn't get there, signed a 1-year deal with the Texans to remain in Houston. And where the tight end room is at right now, Dalton Schultz, basically after this year, is expendable for this Texans team. Cade Stover, the 2nd-year rookie tight end out of Ohio State. And then behind that, it's really wide open, right? The 7th-round pick, Luke Lachey, Irv Smith Jr., who signed a vet-min deal. And then you have Brevin Jordan. And if you don't believe me on how good Jordan was doing last offseason before he got injured, maybe you'll believe DeMeco Ryans, head coach of the Houston Texans. This is what he had to say last offseason. Brevin, I joke with the guys. I show plays from practice, from the previous practice in our team meetings. I say, I have my daily Brevin clip. I show a clip of Brevin every day. He has a highlight of just Brevin's playing so fast, so decisive, and he's making some really great catches, tough catches. He's done a great job for himself over this offseason as well. Man, he's improved. I see him. He's confident, and he believes that he's a dude, and he can be a dude for us, and he is. And I'm excited to see that confidence that Brevin is displaying throughout. And, I mean, I was really upset when the Texans lost Jordan last offseason because I really thought the duo of him and Dalton Schultz were really going to help this Texans offense. Cade Stover, the rookie, I don't think they were ready to use him as much as they used him last year. I really thought they were going to have him, in the wings behind Jordan and Schultz. Didn't work out that way, but maybe this year on another contract year for Brevin Jordan, he'll be able to show out in this Texans offense where the tight ends are going to play a pivotal role for Nick Caserio and CJ Stroud. I do think, they're going to run a lot more 2 tight end sets, which means you'll probably see a lot more of Brevin Jordan on the field in 2025. Now, let's go to our next guy who's going to shock a lot of people in 2025, and that's going to be Justin Watson, wide receiver who they signed in free agency. And I know the Texans, they drafted 2 guys in Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. But I really do think Justin Watson could shock a lot of people. He's somebody who kind of fits the mold of this Nick Caley offense. If you look at the Rams offense the past couple of years, right? They had Ben Skoranek a couple of years back. This past year, Jordan Whittington, guys who aren't flashy, aren't the one-on-one target guys, but do all the dirty stuff. They do run blocking, pass blocking here and there. They're sure-handed guys who, when you need, you can get a catch from. And I think that is Justin Watson. Now, for the current Texans wide receiver depth chart, this is how I have it stacked out. I do think Nico Collins is your wide receiver 1. I have the 2 rookies there as wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, and then Christian Kirk, who the Texans traded for this offseason, slotted in as that wide receiver 4. These are the only guys I feel confident in, but besides them, it's wide open for wide receiver 5 and 6, depending on how many guys the Texans keep on their final 53-man roster. I really want to go back to 2023, though, with Justin Watson, where he had a quasi-breakout year for the Chiefs. I know Patrick Mahomes, the Chiefs offense, Andy Reid, high-profile, high-flying offense. But look at these numbers. 27 receptions, 460 yards. The big one right here. 21 first down catches that year out of the 27 receptions that Justin Watson had. 21 of them went for first downs and then 3 touchdowns on the season. That's what C.J. Stroud and this offense needs. You have your down-the-field guys, right? You have Nico Collins, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Knoll. But when it's 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, and those guys are getting double-teamed, those guys, all the attention's on them, can you have somebody who can secure a 4 or 5 yard catch to move the sticks? I think Justin Watson can, and he's going to be somebody that's going to surprise a lot of people by making the Texans 53-man roster, in my opinion, especially if he shows out in camp and does all the things that he needs to do, especially in the run blocking department, where the Texans wide receiver room right now might need a little bit of help. He's somebody who I think can do that, and I think the Texans are going to want to run the ball, so I think Justin Watson could surprise a lot of people. Let's go to the next name on this list, and a lot of people have been mentioning this guy around Texans Twitter, LaDarius Henderson, offensive lineman. The Texans drafted him last year out of the University of Michigan, and shout out to Dr. Barrett. He was one of the first ones on him. Said LaDarius Henderson will be a guy who makes an impact for this Texans team this year. Now, obviously, the Texans added a ton of guys throughout the offseason via trade with Cam Robinson, Ed Ingram. They signed guys in Laken Tomlinson, Jake Andrews they claim off of waivers. There's a lot of moving parts around this offensive line. And LaDarius Henderson could be somebody who shocks a lot of Texans fans and people around the NFL as somebody who's going to come in and make an impact for this Texans team. Seth Payne on Twitter had Nick Caserio on for an interview, and Caserio told him that the most impressive physique transformation this offseason was actually LaDarius Henderson. And it was funny enough because Nick Caserio was asked about Blake Fisher, and he kind of skirted the question a little bit, changed the tune to LaDarius Henderson, and then gave some praise to Kamari Lassiter. But I don't know if that shows more about Fisher or more about how much he's impressed with LaDarius Henderson going into this year. Sideline Sarah, another person who, if you're on Texans Twitter, you got to give her a follow. She does a lot of great work. She said, kind of recapping, because Nick Caserio was also on with Kay Adams last week, and kind of recapping their conversation, Texans GM Nick Caserio gives an update for guard LaDarius Henderson, 2024 7th-round pick. This is what Caserio had to say. LD has been working his ass off really last year. It's unfortunate he kind of had to deal with the double foot surgery. He's been here essentially every day since his season has ended. He was a player that we thought was going to be competitive with the group last year. So it's not once, but twice that Caserio has given a ton of praise to this young kid out of Michigan, a 2024 7th-round pick, and obviously didn't play last year, was on IR. But we look at the Texans offensive line depth chart, and this is just my latest iteration. This is not a set-in-stone depth chart at all, and I'll continue to say this about the Texans offensive line. Nobody's job is safe. There is nobody on this offensive line that I am penciling in as a starter. Everybody's name is in chalk at this point, where you can easily erase it and put up the next guy. Because as far as I'm concerned, there's nobody on this Texans offensive line that has earned that right yet to be a solidified starter on this team. I mean, you can name guys who've been on the team before, like a Titus Howard, Jarrett Patterson, Juice Scruggs, but also, it wasn't the best offensive line unit the past couple of years, and these guys weren't, uber impressive. Ariante Ursary was drafted in round 2 this past season, and DeMeco Ryans seemed pretty adamant as keeping him at tackle, maybe even left tackle with Cam Robinson, who they signed this offseason. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts on this offensive line. And like I said, I will continue to say none of these guys' jobs are safe. I could see, 5, 6, 7 different variations of this Texans offensive line before week 1. So LaDarius Henderson has as good of a shot as anybody to make this Texans 53-man roster, and hell, maybe even start for this Texans offensive line. Next up, let's go to the defensive side of the football. Darrell Taylor, who the Texans signed in free agency. I don't think there's really a question on whether or not Darrell Taylor will make the final 53-man roster. But I do think there's a question of, how much is he going to bring to the table? How much is he going to help this Texans defensive line? I think the answer is quite a bit. He is somebody who is very impressive when it comes to his pass rush. I think he's going to be somebody who is able to give guys like a Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson Jr. a little bit of a breather. Look out for Darrell Taylor to be somebody who's coming off the edge, along with a Derek Barnett, who could surprise a lot of people. I could see Darrell Taylor being one of those guys who we look at the end of the year and be like, wow, Darrell Taylor had like 7 or 8 sacks this year. I think he's that good, and especially all the focus being on Will Anderson Jr., Danielle Hunter, is going to help somebody like Darrell Taylor really shine in the limited role that he's going to get, but I think he's going to make the most out of his snaps this season. I have one more guy who could really shock everybody this year, but before I get into him, make sure you hit up our friends over at Fanatics if you want any Texans jersey this offseason. All you got to do, go to chatsports.com/Texans jerseys. That sends you straight over to the Fanatics website and lets them know that we sent you over there. So if it's a C.J. Stroud, Will Anderson, maybe a Jalen Petrie who just got a contract extension, Stingley got the bag. Any of these guys, you need their jersey, we got you covered. One more time, it's chatsports.com/Texans jerseys. That link will not only be in the comments section, but also the description of today's video. Go check them out today over at Fanatics. One more time, it's chatsports.com/Texans jerseys. All right, let's go into the last name on this list, and it's Alijah Huzzie, cornerback, UDFA cornerback from North Carolina. And this might be the longest shot that I put on this list right here, but I really do think Alijah Huzzie could go out and surprise a ton of people. And it's not going to be at the beginning of the year. And stick with me for a second, because Alijah Huzzie got injured in the pre-draft process at the East-West Shrine Bowl. Really unfortunate. I think he was actually one of the top, interior cornerbacks, a nickel corner that would have gone, I would have said in, round 4, 5, 6, 7, if it wasn't for his injury. This is what Aaron Wilson, insider, had to say on the Texans signing UDFA Alijah Huzzie. Huzzie graded as one of the top nickels in 2025 NFL draft, but went undrafted after torn ACL at the East-West Shrine Bowl practice, per source. Equivalent of a medical redshirt for him this year. He's ahead of schedule and potentially could be ready late season. And he's somebody who I do think at some point this year could make an impact. The Texans, they really had an emphasis on adding more depth in the secondary, and I think they did just that this offseason, right? They signed Ronald Darby to a deal. They have Jimmy Ward in the waiting. They, drafted a couple guys in the secondary as well in Reed and Smith. So they have guys waiting in the wings, and that was one of the big problems with the Texans secondary last year, is when one of the starters got hurt, when Lassiter got injured, or Stingley needed a breather or whatever, they didn't really have any good depth behind those guys. And I don't think Alijah Huzzie's going to be on the initial 53-man roster, but like Aaron Wilson said in that little excerpt, I could see if some injuries pile up, if they're needed down the road, they look to the practice squad and somebody like Alijah Huzzie to bring up to the active roster at some point. And I think he could be a decent, steal. Maybe, it sucks for him that he got injured before the draft, but maybe for the Texans, somebody who could stash away and maybe pull out when needed closer to the end of the season when injuries might pile up for this Texans secondary. That's all I have for you on today's show, folks. If you want to hit me up on Twitter, it's at Jeremy Chugs. My DMs are always open. And as I said at the top of the show, we're almost at 30K. So if you haven't already, go down and hit that subscribe button for daily Texans videos all year long.